So, chapter 9 of Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just. Mesilat Yesharim, yeah, path of the just in plural. So he says like this: we have been speaking about zrizut, zeal, doing things with alacrity. And today we're going to discuss the factors with which diminish zeal.
Okay.
Are those which increase laziness. So zeal is the opposite of atzlut in Hebrew. Atzlut is laziness. And of course, he says, the greatest of them all is seeking rest, hating exertion, and the love of bodily pleasures to their full extent. Right? You got to put in effort. Life is about effort. It's about hard work. And all we want to do is be the guy on the right of the screen and not the guy on the left of the screen. So he divides them into really three things. Says we seek rest. We like nothing better than at the end of a hard day, lying down on your bed, right, and putting your head on your pillow and go, oh, it's pleasurable. And exertion is hard. And bodily pleasures are, of course, extremely enjoyable as well. So all of those go against being someone with zeal, someone that acts with alacrity. And for behold, look at this, for a person like this, the service of God will certainly weigh very heavily upon him. For one who wishes to eat his meals with full peace and tranquility, to sleep without any disturbance, to walk only at his own leisurely pace, or other similar things, undoubtedly, it will be very difficult for him to rise early for synagogue, or to cut his meal short so as to pray the afternoon service, or to go out to perform a mitzvah, if the time is not convenient for him. How much more so to hurry himself to perform a mitzvah or to study Torah, to actually, never mind just do it, but do it with zest. So, right, we all know if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Why? Because people who are lazy, and it's very hard to get them to do anything. So the busier we are, the more, we don't really mean busy, we mean people that are not lazy, right? People that have a little bit of zeal. Those are the people we can give things. Doers. We got the doers. I remember, I'm sure it still exists. There's a whiskey called Doers. I can't remember how exactly you spell it, but something like Dewers or something. But the ads used to be, two fishermen, and it was a guy, standing like this without a fish in between his hands, saying, and it said, you got the talkers, and underneath there was a guy like this, and the fish, fit perfectly, and the doers. So our world is made up of talkers and doers, and you need to be a doer. That's what's required of the Jewish spiritual experience. Is a very active one, not so passive. It's about doing mitzvot. It's about being active. One who habituates himself in these practices is not master of himself to do the opposite of these things, which when he wishes, for his will is already imprisoned in the prison of habit, which has become second nature to him. So not only does a lazy person not want to do that which requires effort, but the lazy person cannot do that which requires effort because he's established a habit. It's become habitual for him. So therefore, it's slow. That becomes a habit. So that's, as he said, when we spoke about the ways to really acquire this is the ways to acquire zeal is to act with energy. The more you act with it, the more it becomes part of your nature, that you're a person that gets up quickly, that's able to do things, that is not sluggish. A person should realize that they were not placed in this world for tranquility, but rather for toil. Right? That is the great mistake that many make. And the Talmud has a beautiful story of Chisda, one of the rabbis of the Talmud, one of the Amoraim. His daughter said to her father, the daughter said to him, who would spend his nights in study of the Torah, doesn't the master wish to sleep a little? See how nicely she spoke to her father, right? Don't you need to sleep, Dad? He said to her, days that are long in quantity, but short in the opportunity to study Torah and perform mitzvot will soon arrive, and we will sleep a lot. Meaning, right? That's the quip, Talmudic quip is, and wit, yeah, we're going to die, right? And then there'll be long in quantity. We'll have a lot of time to rest, but not much time to study Torah, perform mitzvot, because that's what we got to do in this world. I think I've heard in the name of the Kotzker Rebbe, who was also very sharp-witted, he said, you can eat all you want as a child and sleep all you want when you're dead, but now is the time to do the service of God. So, right? That's the intellectual realization of all of this. Man was born to toil is actually a verse, right? La'amel Ish la'amel yulad, Adam la'amel yulad. I can't remember the Hebrew now. I think it's Adam. Adam la'amel yulad. You were born to toil. When a person habituates themselves in this manner, they will certainly find the service of God easy, since they do not lack the preparation and readiness for it. You've got to be ready like a soldier, he says, right? Prepared, exercised, ready to do what is called upon you. We actually went to the changing of the guards in London. Splendid activity. One thing I took from that was hats look better when they are clean. Look how nice these guys look. Okay. This is the way of Torah. Excuse me. This is the way of Torah. Eat bread with salt, drink water in small measure, and sleep on the ground. That's from Pirkei Avot. Kachi darcha shel Torah. This is the way of Torah, right? Lechem b'melach toichel. Mayim b'meshura tishte v'al ha'aretz tishan. Sleep on the ground. The end of the Mishnah is actually, if you do this, ashrecha v'toivlach, you'll be very happy. So Rav Chaim of Volozhin said, no one could ever believe a life with, a general statement about distancing to the utmost extreme from comforts and pleasures could be an enjoyable life. But said Rav Chaim of Volozhin, you could never explain this to a person. But if you do it and you enter this world of spirituality, you enter this new world of Torah, you'll find delight you never found in the mundane world. This, by the way, is meant to be, according to Rabbi Google, this is meant to be a picture of who's called the Altar of Kelm. There were a few major Musa yeshivas, Slobodka, Novodik, and Kelm. The Altar of Kelm, his name was Rav Simcha Zissel Zif, was known to sleep for 2 hours a day. 2 hours a day he would sleep, 4 30-minute. So I can't believe he could, he must have been exhausted, but somehow They say that about the Vilna Gaon as well, that he slept 2 hours a day. I'm not sure how they did it, but the facetious people say like this: "This is the way of Torah, eat bread." Right? They read it as, "This is the way of Torah, eat bread." No, you've got to do it with. Okay, fine. So, it's a choice, right? Are you here to try and enjoy yourself as much as you can, or are you here to try and elevate yourself and make it as best an impact on this world as you can? That, my friends, is the great choice. Now, another factor which diminishes zeal is false anxiety. Right? We know that depressed people, actually, anxious people, cannot do much. They are it's very debilitating. Says in Mishlei, King Solomon says, the lazy one says, there is a lion cub on the way, a lion is roaming the streets. How can I do anything? They are frozen by anxiety. And the Talmud says, oh, hang on a second. Happy is the man that fears always, in Proverbs. So Rabbi Yishmael said to him, his student asked him, what are you telling me? Anxiety is bad. Anxiety is good. It says you should be fear always. That verse is written with regard to matters of Torah, that one should be afraid lest he forget them. For everything else, one must trust in God. So the Talmud does have a place for a little bit of anxiety, and that is in the area of Torah and remembering it.
You must have gotten here in 2 minutes.
You need to remember it. Okay. Yeah. Now, I'm glad that Dr. Oskars has joined us for this part.
Yes.
How you, Doc? Okay. Because he now enters a very interesting discussion. On the one hand, he says, anxiety is debilitating. Don't worry too much. Too much worry is a very bad thing. And then he says like this. He says, the summary of the matter is that a man must make himself incidental in worldly matters, but fixed in the service of God, be content and satisfied in all worldly matters with whatever comes to him. Don't make too much fuss about your, what we call gashmias, your physicality, taking what comes to hand. Be far from rest and close to toil and exertion, his heart trusting securely in God and not fearing the future and whatever mishaps it may bring. So a person who's on this path has a lot of trust in God, is not overdoing the physical. In fact, the physical is incidental in a way, and the service of God is the main occupation with which one should do with zeal and toil and exertion. Now, perhaps you will say, behold, we see that the sages everywhere obligated a man to guard himself well and not put himself in danger, even if he is a righteous person with many merits. For instance, the Talmud says, everything is in the hands of heaven except colds and heat strokes. And the Torah says, you shall guard yourselves very carefully. Hence, one should not decide to trust in God in all situations. And even the Talmud Yerushalmi says, even when performing a mitzvah, do not rely on miracles. Don't trust in God. What do you mean? Right? So you can't rely, right? Vaccination site, enter here, right? You're going to turn around and say, I trust in God. It's not going to happen to me. No. That's not Judaism. Judaism says you need to make every effort to take care of yourself. So now, how do we put the two together? Because where does it begin and where does it end? Right? You've got to take care of all your needs. On the other hand, he's saying if you want to learn Torah and serve God and do the mitzvot, you need to not be too concerned about some things. So how do we find the balance? So he says something interesting. I don't think it's that novel, but it's said very nicely. Know that there is fear and there is fear. There is justified fear and there is foolish fear. There is trust in God and there is recklessness, right? So let's try to define when is someone trusting in God positively? That's good. And when does that become recklessness in the face of disaster? The Lord, blessed be He, has made man with sound intellect and clear reasoning in order that he may guide himself in the right way and guard from harmful things which were created to punish the wicked. That's the guiding light. The lamppost, right, is, right, seichel, sound intellect, clear reasoning. God gave it to us. Just think. A little bit of seichel goes a long way. But someone who does not want to guide himself in an intelligent manner, wants to take risks and exposes himself to dangers, this is not trusting God. Don't bring God into that, but rather foolishness. God's going to take care of you. No, He's not. God told you, I've already taken, everyone knows the story of the flood and the guy that, a car comes, a truck comes to pick him up. He says, no, God's going to save me. And then the waters go up and then a boat comes. He's on the first floor already. He says, jumping. He says, no, God's saving me. Eventually he's on the roof. A helicopter comes. He's like, no, God's saving me. Eventually the waters come, sweep him off. He dies. He goes to heaven. God, right? And he says to God, God, I was trusting in you. Where were you? He says, you idiot. I sent you a truck. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. All right? So don't be foolish, right? Trusting God doesn't mean you can be passive. Trusting God means that if you're following God's ways, it will work out for the best. Might be painful, it might not work, but it will be for the best. So God's given us brains. He's given us intelligence. And a person, it would be a very interesting study. I don't want to point fingers. But I know that with COVID, religion became a major rationalization, right? It's a major rationalization for taking the correct precautions. So such a person, he says, sins, right? It's a sin to have false trust in that he is acting against the will of God who desires that a man guard himself. So you can't claim I'm trusting in God when your seichel tells you to take precaution, because that's the gift God gave you to take care of yourself. Okay. The type of fear and guarding of oneself which is appropriate is that which is based on the guidance of wisdom and reason. Follow seichel. Be intelligent about it. On this, scripture says, the clever man sees the evil and escapes, but the fool continues through and is punished. Why is he punished? Because, never mind the stupidity, he's doing a sin. It's a sin, right? That's what Rav Hutner, we often quote Rav Hutner. Rav Hutner said, right? It's an aveira to be stupid, right? He said, it's a sin to be stupid. Because God gave you, right? This is the what we say, the makor. This is where it comes from. God gave us seichel to use. If you don't use it, you're not following the ways of God. The foolish fear. Now, on the one hand, we said betachon, then responsibility, and now, what is foolish fear? is when a man wants to add protection upon protection and fear upon fear, devising precautions for his precautions in such a way that this results in neglect of Torah study and divine service. You can overdo it, right? That I would call anxiety, right? So there's anxiety, there's foolishness, and then there's a level with what's called bitachon, trusting in God that with the seichel He gave us, things will work out for the best. Which way did I go? All right. The general principle to distinguish between the two types of fear is, as our sages specified, saying, where harm is likely, it is different. Meaning, don't rely, don't take chances, don't take big risks when harm is likely. You have to use your seichel. And of course, that became, right, all these graphs that we all became very proficient at looking at and using. That's why we had to use our seichel and say, okay, if the positivity rate's over 5%, put on your masks, take extra precautions, etc. We learn from here that it is not, I love this sentence, by the way. We learn from here that it is not the fear that causes him to be lazy, but rather the opposite. The laziness causes the fear, right? When people don't want to do things, they make up all sorts of reasons. And once again, the topic here is alacrity, is zeal. So we're talking about someone saying, I'm not going to do a mitzvah, I'm not going to run to do a mitzvah because it's dangerous, and Sometimes your fear upon fear, that's coming from your laziness. This was, by the way, one of the central themes in the Musa movement was dealing with man and his rationalizations, right? A person can rationalize anything, right? Everything's in the Torah. If you want it, I'll bring you a verse to tell you you're doing the right thing, right? Never mind your own seichel, right? But it's always broken. It's never true, right? You can always find inconsistencies. You can find holes in it. And the Balei Musa, that's really what they try to develop, that a person he first is able to hear his own rationalizations, and then secondly, able to undo them. So at the conclusion of this chapter, he says, the reason why zrizut comes after zehirut, which in English means, the reason why zeal, alacrity, comes after watchfulness is because you can't jump to the second step before you hit the first step. So once a person's opened their eyes to see his deeds, been watchful of them, made the counting of the mitzvot against the sins, as we mentioned, start to think about your life and what you're doing, then you can go to the next step, zrizut. It will be easy for him to turn from evil and to long for the good, right? Become motivated, realize how important it is, how much worth there is, how much value there is in our Torah, in our good deeds, in our working on ourselves, elevating our character, being a useful member of society, and be zealous in it, right? He uses the word zealousness here in that sense, that you'll be motivated, fully motivated with a lot of energy, and this is evident. And that, my friends, is the great message today from chapter 10. I thought it was very interesting. that, you know, it's a book of character, but he really deals with so many life issues, right? If this chapter had been published before COVID to the world, and everyone was told, you know, follow a bissel seichel, what a different world experience we would have had. We got a few minutes for comments, questions, alternate ideas. Mom, I don't know why, but I can barely hear you. If you try again. Not really, but let me go on. I can't hear. Sorry, Ma, I can't hear you properly. I know you're asking something about the vaccinations.
Yes, well, your notices, the two notices that say, you know, COVID vaccinations here and there. How relevant is that to what you are?
Because what happens if a person would say, I'm trusting in God and I'm not going to get COVID and I'm not going to get sick and I don't need a vaccination? Are you allowed to trust in God when there is danger? Are you allowed to say, that's my answer? And the answer is no. In fact, the answer is yes. But your trust in God is that you should do what God said to do, which is listen to this seichel that he gave us. That's really the answer. It's not that you're not trusting in God. You are trusting in God. You're trusting that this is, you know, do we know everything? Are we, you know, we don't know everything, but we have to. You know, Dr. Oscars likes that comment from Dr. Fauci, right? When someone said, do you know everything? He says, no, we don't know everything, right?
That's right.
But we have to use what we, you know, whatever seichel we have to use. But
in terms of the vaccines, we went years ago, went through an experience where for some reason, when the measles vaccine came out, there was, for some reason in the Frum community, there was resistance to this new vaccine. And I'm not sure what the rationale was for the resistance, but there were a fair number of people who opted not to get it for their babies. But after some of the babies got measles and with very bad outcomes, their rabbis took the bull by the horns and said, it's a, like you're saying, it's a sin not to get it.
right.
You can't serve God if you're damaged. And after that, nobody turned down the vaccine.
Yeah.
And that's the same should be for COVID.
Agreed. All right, everyone. Thank you. Good to be back on track. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you.
Hope your wife feels better.
Thank you very much. I can't hear, Mom. Sorry.
Thank you, Rabbi. May you my names her when I read the Psalms.
Sorry? What you say, Norma?
I wanted to know your wife's name so I can add it to my list when I read the Psalms.
You heard it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Mom, I'll call you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.